Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NC podcast. My name is Natasha Collins, and I am the host and founder of NC Real Estate, which includes its members club for landlords and property investors to come and build profitable property portfolios that completely align with their goals. If you haven't been to my website yet, I don't know why not, but you need to. Head to ncrealestate.co.uk. Check out all of my resources. There's tons of them. There's freebies, there's the blog, there's obviously the podcast that you listen to. So make sure that you head on over to ncrealestate.co.uk. And if you get a pop-up when you get to my website, don't just ignore it and click X. Type your name in, type your email address. Let me send you my free stuff because it's awesome. And you're going to want it if you want to grow your property portfolio. So make sure that you're doing that. Today, I am so excited. I've got Chris Moore with me. Chris is a heritage specialist, chartered surveyor, project manager, owner of REDEC Refurbishment, researcher, and property investor. Chris, hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. Not too bad. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. We're going to have a detailed discussion about a part of the industry which I don't talk too much about, and we need to have frank conversation around heritage property, listed property, construction, and let's get all of that in because I know you're a specialist in this side of things. So very firstly, how did you get started in the property industry?
Well, I got started in construction almost by accident, a bit like how I got started in the property industry really, but I wanted to be an English teacher. That's the absolute honest truth. And I started doing a degree in English, and I realised that it probably wasn't for me. And I managed to switch using some of my credit to the surveying, construction, and architecture course. So, and then I carried that forward, and I started working for a small surveying practice, and eventually became a quantity surveyor, later chartered quantity surveyor, and and then I've sort of grown my businesses, and how I got into the property industry, that was completely by accident, in terms of how I became a landlord, because I didn't sort of set out to be a landlord. I sort of just became one through a construction project that we were doing, which I can talk about a bit more if you want me to. But okay. Well, basically, my wife had a property. My wife is a genius. She did a very clever thing many years ago. She had some inheritance money, and when she went to university, when she was, whatever age it is, 18, 19, she used her inheritance money to buy a HMO in the town that she was going to university, so in Southampton. Mm-hmm. So she became an undergraduate student and a landlord at the same time, which is incredibly clever of her, because she basically managed to sort of pay her way through uni by being a landlady. Mm-hmm. Anyway, when she left there and moved to London, it became difficult to manage because obviously it's so far away, and well, you know what students are like as tenants. They take maybe a little bit more management than perhaps others. And so we had met, and I'd sold my place, and we were renting in Canterbury, and a friend of ours had a property who he was trying to sell it, but it sort of became almost unmortgageable. But we came to an agreement whereby we could buy it from him in installments without using credit. He would keep his name on the title, and we used the money from the Southampton flats and my house that we'd sold, and managed to do a deal with him. And after I think it was about 18 months, we paid him off in full. And what it was that we bought was a beautiful Victorian building, terrace building, but it was heavily run down, and it wasn't listed, but it was in a conservation area, and it required a lot of work doing to it to bring it back up to standard, because he'd been very generous with his tenants, and his tenants were all artists and what were some of the other ones there? I don't know, but they were all occupations that were a bit sort of you don't hear very often. And what it was, he was only charging them a peppercorn rent because he felt like the place was so run down that he couldn't charge them the full going rate. But what really was happening was these people were people that were working and earning, I think most of them were earning very good salaries in London, and they were using it as sort of like a holiday cottage, a second property.
Okay.
Yeah. So we basically went in and we refurbished it all to building reg standards, and we inherited these tenants, and then one by one they all left, and then we were left with one tenant in the building. So we lived in some of it, and then we had another tenant, and then we turned the top flat into assisted accommodation. So that's how I became inducted into the property industry, having already been in the construction industry for a few good years. So.
And so when you got into the construction industry, how did
Yeah.
you decide that a quantity surveyor was the type of surveyor you wanted to be? And for everybody listening who doesn't know what a quantity surveyor is, what is a quantity surveyor?
Well, a quantity surveyor, I think in America they call them construction accountants. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially the professional that handles all the budgets, the finances. So it can be working for the client on the client side, or it can be working for the contractor, doing all the accounts for the subcontractors and the buying and all that sort of stuff. So I think the most contentious issue really on any project is always the finances. So the QS is always the one that gets it in the neck, because you haven't made enough profit, or the client is saying you're overcharging them, or you're not charging enough. So you could never win basically as the QS. I became a QS. I'll be brutally honest with you. It's not an overly great thing, but the reason I became a QS was because when I was doing my undergraduate course, it was on the endangered species list, and the government back then used to pay your tuition fees if you were doing a course that led to you becoming a professional that the country needed. Okay. Of course, when the recession happened in sort of 07, 08, I think that was one of the first things they got rid of. But I think they are still doing it again now. And of course, I've got a leaflet here actually to hand, the CITB. They actually do a lot of grants now. Okay. Still do all the sort of apprenticeships that I've managed through the years, and even my research is all paid for by the CITB. So there are still grants out there, even if you can't get some from the government.
And the CITB are?
The Construction Industry Training Board.
Okay.
So if you are, it may benefit some people that if you as a developer or just as a general contractor, depending on what type of contractor you are, you have to legally be registered with the CITB, and they take a percentage, I think it's 1 or 2% of your gross national insurance quarterly return, and some of your CIS return as well for your subcontractors. So they take a small percentage, but then you can get grants back for apprentices, you can do undergraduate courses, postgraduate courses, all sorts of different things. And you can do all the health and safety courses as well if you want to do that, first aid. I mean, the list is really huge. So I think you can still opt to become a member of the CITB, but if you are of a certain turnover and a certain number of staff in a certain trade, then you are legally mandated to be a member of CITB, if that makes sense.
Okay, yep, I get that. Okay, so you joined the construction industry, you fell into being a quantity surveyor. Yeah. Then what happened from there? How did you then pivot and start doing the heritage buildings and the listed buildings? Was that something that was involved in that?
Well, I've always had an interest in history and building conservation. I've always found that those projects are just generally more interesting anyway. But I've also, if you was to say, I mean, I've always looked at my skills and my CV of the courses I want to do and experience I want to get as trying to make myself as employable as possible, basically.
Yeah, fair.
Because you don't know what's around the corner, and it's skills is what it's all about, and experience and stuff like that. So what I tried to do was look long term at the problems of the future, if you like, and if the construction site is to be more turned into more of a factory where everything's built off site. I mean, in Australia, they use bricklaying robots now to build houses. You've got BIM as well. You've got a lot of stuff like that that's ongoing in the construction industry. But all of those things, to a degree, you couldn't really attach to conservation and listed buildings and historic buildings. So I've always found that for me personally, because those buildings require so much unique attention, that they would probably require more human requirements rather than software or robots. Even I don't know what the future holds for that sort of thing, but there's no way you can process and do one shoe fits all for older buildings, because they just don't work like new build residential or whatever like that. So I found it more interesting. I've just always found that there seems to be a lack of knowledge and skills in that area, just generally speaking, talking to people, that a lot of people shy away from working on historic buildings and things like that. So I just sort of went feet first in the deep end, and I've worked on lots of historic buildings, and I've since obviously done lots of courses and things. So it just generally interests me more, and it's just something that I think, as well as an employability, it can also be more profitable, because if you've got the skills and the knowledge and the labour, and you can do a good project like that, you get known for doing it, and it means you get more projects. So it's sort of more of a commercial reason, as well as more of an interest reason as well.
And then, as well as doing that, and as well as specialising, you do the research and you do the tutoring as well, right?
Yeah, I have been at UCM and at the University of Kent. But my research, which again is paid for by the CITV, I'm legally obliged to plug them at all times for my research. I read paperwork the other day. Plug. I find that very fascinating. It all came about because we had done a significant restoration project to a castle in Kent called Walmer Castle, and it was built by Henry VIII when England broke away from Europe for the first time. And there's lots of parallels, I tell you, I won't go into it. And it just fascinated me as a building so much. And when I did my master's, I did a case study on that particular project. And then I went to the University of Kent with a proposal to do some research into that castle and some of the other ones that Henry VIII had built at the same time. And through the literature review and speaking to my mentors at university, it quickly became known that there isn't a huge amount of research for those castles, which is very odd, because you would imagine that everything to do with Henry VIII that could possibly be known has probably been written about. And I assume that, but actually these castles, there's very little written about them. A lot of people don't know about them. Academics haven't really, studied them for many, many years. So it became a good niche, if you like. And, it's got its challenges as well. But I've been I've been doing that on a part-time basis with them. And it's really enjoyable.
And so how are you fitting all of this in?
I could ask you the same question. You're the same as me. You're doing all these things. How do we fit all these things in? I mean, I've also got a 12-month-old son. I mean, that's tired dad face at the moment. That's
well, that's one step extra that I have added into the mix. So you tell me how you're fitting all of this in.
Well, I mean, there's 24 hours in a day, Natasha. I mean, No, I like to be as organised as I can be, and compartmentalised, and try and separate everything. And I mean, learning to delegate is obviously a thing. You need to not try and do everything yourself. I've never looked at what I do for a very long time. I've never looked at it as work. I mean, that old saying that if you can find something you enjoy for a living, you never work a day in your life. So I do genuinely enjoy construction and property and heritage. So there is that about it. I mean, I do genuinely enjoy it, and I don't, the lines blur really. But a saying that used to be around in the 90s, which you don't really hear anymore, is work hard, play hard. So, we work hard for a reason. And, I have a very enjoyable social and family life. So that's the reason why I get up every day and do what I do.
I completely get it. You make it work. So